Alright, everybody, this is the Harboring Light. I'm Mary. I give a conservative perspective about the world around me. Feedback is immensely important. Feel free to reach out. 2 ways to do this is through email and comments on YouTube. And also, I've done it. I gave appreciation to viewers who interact with me, and one of them was featured on my podcast. If you want to see content like that, or you want your comments talked about, or you follow through and all of that, reach out to me. Alright, and all of that, I'll link my email and then of course my YouTube channel in this episode. Okay, word of mouth is immensely important, so feel free to reach out. Feel free to spread the word about that. And what that means is that, hey, friends, co-workers, loved ones, so forth, say, have you heard of the show The Harboring Light? All you got to do is type it in. There you go. Alright, so on to the topic of choice here. So this is going to be split up into 2 parts. In this episode, I'm going to focus in on my thoughts about aspects of food marketing and the aspects of food in our culture. And then on Wednesday, I'm going to wrap up everything with facts, right? And then I'm going to give examples, a lot of different, I think a really good example and other sort of examples that implement those things. All right, let's dive in and let's go. Food all everywhere. It's kind of like that old school, in the 80s they call them b-boys, with what's that one rap group? Hold on, let me look it up. With the fat boys, kind of sometimes you get that implication. All you can eat, Those who know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm saying. So, anyway, needs to say, I think certain rap songs from the 1980s are pretty keen, with the aspects of more variation, more intellect, more upbeat versus the hardcore, look at me, kill everybody, in the 90s and so forth, and the salacious stuff we see today. But anyway, you kind of, especially now with the influencers having that mukbang, what that used to be just a one-off thing where it was somebody, if I'm not mistaken, that's more Korean. It's one-off thing where it wasn't supposed to be something that's normalized, And so that's interesting with the aspects of how influencers really shape a lot and are, I guess you could say, which tools really, when you think about it, for implementing marketing, advertising. Alright, so what are my thoughts about the aspects of food marketing and how it is presented in our culture? Now, as I said, I think that advertising is very interesting and really I really like it. I like it because it is a good sign of the aspects of what the free market is really about. It showcases that visually. The free market is in itself a system in which rewards for the showcasing different services. You have variety. Pretty much, sum everything up. It is with trial and error. The professional way into seeing what works, what you don't want, what you do want as far as your own consumer consumption. And you can only get that if you have a free market. If you don't have a free market, you're limited in your choices. You get what you get. And then it also goes to the bottom of the line, in which, in the essence of that, we get into a lot of different issues that I wouldn't say they're issues. It's just it comes to the territory of about the socio-economic issues of it, parts of it, the political and so forth. Because let's say you even in America, with the aspects of America is supposed to be the land of the free. Everybody, for the most part, is supposed to be lucrative, but there's caveats to all of these things, with the aspects of issues like homelessness, and the aspects of issues of the working poor, the aspects of issues of middle class, lower class, upper class, and so forth, and the subjugation of all of this. And then when you flip that and you go into other powers that be, where when it's essentially supposed to be governmental powers that be in different systems, where they just end up in England, when there's a parliament and the monarchy, how does that implement itself in the aspects of the economy? And then how do people think about food, or how does that implement? And also with that, the supplemental, the surplus means of people to getting what they want. Because it's unfortunate, England is changing a lot because of the influx of immigration, and that's a really good example. When we get in the aspects of, excuse me, I'll be right back. Which I never understood. It should not be a bad thing to have nationalism when it comes to protecting your country and having your values not compromised, and really saying, well, you need to assimilate if you want to live here. You cannot live here if you don't want to do those things. And this is wild to me. This whole thing being pushed, a narrative we have to be welcoming, even though they don't welcome us. I don't understand the logic behind that. But anyhow, and on down the list with the aspects of different cultures and the way their governmental systems run, that's really key into how people see themselves and what they do and how they do things. And so, food for the most part, as I mentioned sometime back on my podcast, food for the most part is pretty much a icebreaker, because when you think about food, it harmonizes. It gets, it's something that people gleefully want to talk about. Now, that also goes into the aspects of the disposition of how they want to talk about it, because some people see. I'm sorry about that. I'll be right back. Alright, so some people see, food as fuel. I'm well balanced and all of these. And see, that's the issue with what we're going with, and this is spreading to not just in America, certain parts of Europe and stuff, where food is really not showcased in a healthy way, where it's really, that there's no joke with the aspects of the obesity crisis here, and the aspects of how influencers here, and influential, which is what they do, they influence things on social media, is normalizing the aspects of overconsumption with food to the means of saying, well, it's fine for me to have just by waking up, have all of my caloric intake in just one meal or one coffee drink or so forth, and to not only do this, but to constantly do this every day. And so getting back to, and I'll wrap up with how food is with the influencers and on social media towards the end of the podcast. But with what I'm finding out and researching, and then what I've heard and seen, in years before now, and just viewing things on TV, and then people discussing this that who are professionals in this. These are my thoughts. I just see it as it's just another means and gate in which it's seeing, what works, what doesn't work, as far as presenting what food actually means to people, and then how to package that to them. So what is that? What am I saying here? Let me break this down. So, sorry about that. No, snorting there. Biggie piggy. Anyway. So, alright. Here we go. So, as I said, with there's a lot of psychological means in which food is thought about especially for American culture. And that is greatly showcased and understood, I think. And when we think about food marketing. Now, there's assorted things, when you get into you get more details when you get into the psychology of the color that is used to excite attention, and the aesthetic of the color is what is supposed to be represented by certain colors. That's another thing, and I'll get to that next. But for the most part, there's a lot of psychological reasons in which people choose certain foods, whether that be good or bad. Even in the bad, they are the aspects of why, people choose certain foods. So with the aspects of, let's say, someone, when they were children, they were obese or something like this, right? I think this is sorry about that. I think this is a really good example of the aspects of how powerful discipline can be, and then transformation really means, versus something that's easy to do, easy to get, and you implement this whole, saying accept me for what I am until you can find other means to do this. That's just the easy road to take. What I mean by that is the Ozempic, or the what is that called now? It's being pushed a lot in food, associated with food. Hold on, I'm looking it up right here. Yeah, the GLP-1, stuff like that. Alright, so let's say there's a person, like I said, going back to that, and he or she were obese as a kid, and it was really hard on them, and so when they understood how they wanted to look, they knew what they wanted to do, and they had the sources, and they just had the sources to do so, and the means to do so. They started to change. They got into the culture of wanting to be fit, and what that means is, it goes hand in hand. Exercising and having a well-balanced diet really goes a long way. And that's where a lot of things go wrong a lot of times, where people say, well, I'm working out here, so I can eat whatever I want, however I want. When you gotta balance all that out, because you're working your body, but if you still put junk in your body, it's all for nothing, because you're not supplementing your body with nourishing foods to get you to the next step, to how you want to look, right? Versus, well, I'm gonna perpetuate this idea of accept me for who I am, love me for who I am, and then get a whole crowd to support me and back me up on this, right? But I don't really think that. No. Because I'm just gonna, start this whole movement and then push to where it change the narrative about how food and image looks, right? But wait, hey, Ozempic is out now, and guess what? And then, like I said, the GLP-1s are out now. So hey, the heck with that. I'm gonna look good. I'm gonna do because it's an easy way out. So I'm gonna take it. When in actuality, if you just take things like that, you're gonna find out the repercussions of it. Because and when my husband and I were growing up, now this was something that was going on before us, but there's the whole aspects of this fad yo-yo dieting, right? And stuff being out on the market saying, hey, and it's still out now, but in assorted ways. But the Ozempics and the GLP-1 is one of the worst offenders of that, where you can use a supplementary drug to get to where you need, when that's just artificial, really, and you're just abusing something because you want to take the easy way out, versus people who really need things like that, who generally have health issues that's the best alternative for them. And so a lot of this stuff is influential in the aspects of how food and food marketing is associated in our culture, I think. So because it rallies and banks on the ideas that people have a personal relationship with food in different assorted ways, whether that be a healthy way, a non-healthy way, and the list goes on. That's very fascinating. When I'm sorry about that. This is for Katie. I got something going on this summer, and so they are giving me all the information on that. So all right, so with that, there's something to be said about the aspects of how, like I said, it's very interesting when we talk about food and food marketing. Now, for the most part, I found it quite interesting because of the aspects of me growing up in the 90s. And I can't stress enough again, I keep using this as an example because the 90s was really good about telling a story with mostly in their marketing strategies. And food was really one of them. Especially when you get in the aspects of food and children. Now, so here's the thing. So I remember all these assorted advertisements that went with it, and it was interesting enough that it came with stories, and it came with these sort of different assorted things with the whole idea of a slice of life, but from a kid's point of view. And so I think when you look at that and you look at the aspects of families and women, it's really showcased pretty well in the aspects of where the attention really went a lot and really goes a lot when we talk about food and advertising. Now, for the most part, on the surface level, it seems as if that's a big attraction. Kids and women, women and kids. And so, especially when we get into breakfast cereals here, or breakfast food, snack foods. And a lot of stuff that was out when my husband and I were kids in the 90s, they had to rebrand it and fix it because, it wasn't really good. It was not the best because, there was a lot of different breakfast cereal that was just pretty much, sugar in the bowl, like with the Food and Drug pushing back, saying no, because that it was still a time where the implement of what the parent is saying and doing really has a lot of worth and merit and values, and there was a lot of real implications in the aspects of the consumer has the power and choice in which we want the direction, how we want things to go, and we don't want to, alienate that. And so, with that said, it's quite interesting how that goes versus today, where it's something, you grew up with an image. So and the Angie Mama image, right? So that's another thing with how influential food and marketing and packaging is. So the Angie Mama image, right? Now that was something that a lot of people grew up with, and it wasn't anything that was something that was negative or derogatory. But some person, decides to be on the marketing team, the food marketing team, and say, well, hey, man, this is kind of problematic. So let's change or maybe not showcase her because it's, implementing something that's negative. Or that's the scales of that. When in actuality, they don't understand about, they didn't take the time to know about the actual person, who the model who was showcased as Angie Mama, how she was one, they chose her, and she was one of the first, and she did a lot of things for her own community. She gave back to her own community, and that's really detrimental to her legacy because her family is also too was making note of that, of how all the things that she contributed and how very valuable and how how positive something like that was and is, and to mess with manipulate that just because your ideology says it's wrong. See, that's also influence. Very interesting how the power and the influence of food marketing can cultivate culture in good or bad ways too. All right, so hold on. I'm going to just a minute. Just a second. All right. All right. Okay. All right. So, all right with that. Sorry, I had to take care of that right quick. All right. So, needless to say, I would say the times in which we're living in now, I don't know, it's kind of like some kind of surreal alternate universe, if that makes any sense to you or to y'all. So it's like we are in simulation, right? Sometimes it feels that way. Sometimes it's presented that way. But I think it's only presented that way if you perceive it to be. You know, if you don't actually, and see, that's the interesting part of that. So if you're perpetually online, yes, it might seem that way. But if you have yourself, merit yourself in the aspects of, well, I want to be a part of the real world. I want to engage with people. You know, I want to have a family, and that's just not so much. But I say this because, I mean, you gotta call things for what it is, and see how these things are influencing and shaping culture. So, for instance, you know, with this overconsumption culture here, people just getting up in arms over, oh, this latest thing that came out. Now, this is nothing new. I mean, in a sort of ways, these things have showcased themselves, you know, throughout different generations, but in different ways. And, so, a really good example of that is the McRib. When it comes out, it'll come in season, out season, it'll be discontinued, and it's a whole following with it. And so now it's where the influencers are saying, oh, well, look, hey, instead of having a reasonable attitude towards food and things, no, I'm not going to do that, because guess what? If I do that, I don't get the clicks and the views. So I'm going to go with this one-off thing about a mukbang and overindulge in that and say, ooh, look at, and then also add with the ASMR or something like that, by making it soothing while I'm, being a gluttonous here. That's what I mean. That's gluttony. It is y'all glory. I guess that's a sin. But it's just fascinating that people just sit there and watch somebody just stuff themselves like that. But yeah, and then they this avocado guy, he bankrolled himself on just eating himself literally almost to death, and how these things influence the aspects of how food is thought about in our culture, and then how also the marketers, food marketers, pay attention to these things, and they implement themselves in different ways to that. That's quite fascinating. So that's all I got. I'm going to go into even more depth on this. I just want to wrap up and say, well, you know what? Personally, I want to say these things about myself too. So, when I was growing up, now I can say I was that kid who was, that overweight kid there. And so, it is interesting because, I saw food as a means, unfortunately, as a means of joy and stuff like that. And when I knew, and it was a blessing and a sad curse, but I would say it's more of a blessing than anything, because early on I knew I had to make a decision to get healthy and to do things. So, I took the steps, and then it took a while to get there. But by the time I was in high school and everything, I was, healthy and everything. And then I slipped because when I was about 19, I didn't know, and I found out I had a thyroid problem, and that's the whole thing with the aspects of saying, well, that doesn't knock people who actually have a condition, who have conditions where it's harder and harder to lose weight. But it's one of those things where if you have the determination or discipline, you can do it. And I did do it, and I was able to do that. And then, trim and everything. And I met my husband, and then, meaning of my life, and then having children, especially when you have 3 kids, your body, you gain weight. And then I didn't want to, perpetually be the image, hey, I'm not gonna, do anything with my body, or I'm just gonna have this little, it's just, what do you want from me? I had 3 kids. No, I want to teach the value and the aspects of discipline and health and taking care of yourself. And, also my husband and I, have that idea too for our kids, because we want to be there for our kids. And we want our kids to share in the same value. So I view food in a very different way. I view the aspects of health and fitness in that same light too, the way it's important to have that, see food as a lot of sorted things, have balance, and see it as fuel, but also see it as it can be enjoyed, but in moderation, in the aspects of that. And then seeing the delight to be able to cook for my children what they like, and all these things. And so I just find it very interesting how interpersonal and it can be if you look at it from that point of view with food marketing. And that's what I think. Alright, so as I said, y'all feel free to extend out the conversation with this. And the best way to do that is through, like I said in the beginning of the conversation, the beginning of the show, email and YouTube. Alright, so this reaches the end of the Harboring Light. Okay, so tune in, turn up, and absolutely take care out there. Bye-bye for now.